Alright, since I had so many complaints about my last review of Power Grid, which if you knew me, I wouldn't care. I just make the videos quick and for the fun of it, but somehow Power Grid review is one of my most popular videos, so I'm going to do it again. This way you guys can't complain anymore. Power Grid, it's wonderful, it's great, buy it. I mean, if you know Power Grid, it's one of the highest ranked games on Board Game Geek. It's popular with just about everybody. I mean, it's a Euro with the auctions, and you just can't go wrong. Even my parents love Power Grid, and they say, "Hey, did you bring Power Grid over this time?" My parents are in their 50s and 60s, so if they're into Power Grid, you should be too. I mean, absolutely beautiful map. Which includes, as you can see, the color code on both sides. They have color coded sections. Color coded, color coded, color coded. Depending on how many plays you have, is how many color coded, is how many sections you use. So, for example, if you're playing a 2-player game, you would just play with 3 sections. So the one time I played a 2-player game on the US map, we played with the Northeast, Southeast, and the Midwest, I should say. Midwest, whatever, the old Northwest. If you know Civil War terms, the old Northwest. The board also includes the resource chart. The resources are placed on here, and depending on how many resources there are, is the cost. For example, if there's coal in this box, it's worth 1. If there's oil in this box, it's worth 1. Radiation, nuclear power in this one, it costs 1. Garbage in this one, it costs 1. So, as you start the game off, you put it in. If since resources are always entering the game at the end of every turn, they go forward. Some resources, depending on what power plants you take, depending on what power plants everybody takes, after a while, will keep getting cheaper and cheaper, making it more important to have power plants using those resources as compared to if you're using more resources than what's being put on every turn, you're eventually going to end up on the more expensive side of the board. So, for example, I love the cards too. I love the cards. They're great. For example, first off, let's see. Okay. Just for an example, the 24 comes into account because the lower card numbers are the earlier power planes, and when you're going through the stack of cards for the power planes, because you draw 8 cards, you have 8 cards of the present market and the future market. The future market, the highest rated card, always gets put back in at the end of the turn in the early stages of the game. So, for example, if this card, let's just say, it costs 2 garbage to power. So, yeah. So if garbage is cheap, you want cheap. This one is a dual one. You can either use coal or oil to power it. This one just takes oil, and the number on the house is how many cities it powers, because you use houses when you move into the zone, when you move into cities. Why am I putting it back? Okay. So now, most important, the more cities you're in. Alright. So now that we fix that, at the start of the game, you pick who's player 1 and who's player 2, who's 1, 2, 3, 4, however you want to pick it. You know, all these rules always have a rule for how you pick the first player, but just pick it however you want. Now, the importance of who's in first and who's not, it comes around for each step of the game. At first, when you buy a power plant, whoever is the first player gets the first choice of power plants. This could be a good or a bad thing. In the early game, the first 4 power plants all only power 1 city, and you can only buy 1 power plant. So that means you have to buy a 1 power plant if you're in first place. Then, as the power plants move up, other players get the option of better power plants than what you had. Then in the other two part, in both buying resources, which is the next turn, and in building on cities, it goes in reverse order. So you're going to have the last options, and thus the most expensive options when you buy off the resource grid, and you're also going to have the secondary options whenever you build a city. This is especially important in games because during when it's in phase 1, the early part of the game, you can only build one power plant in each city. Then in phase 2 and phase 3 it opens up. But when I say you can only build one power plant in a city, I mean if one player already has Savannah, or you can't move into Savannah. So it's a way to also cordon people off to keep people from getting into your zone as such, and it's also a way to keep the game from having a runaway winner. At the end of the turn, you get a certain amount of money depending on how many cities are actually powered. You can always outbuild your ability to supply power. It's just costing you money in the long run. Really, I mean, there's a ton of expansions out for it now, with maps for different cities. The cards are great. The rule book is a little bit confusing, but I have some good, for example, good reference sheets from Board Game Geek. For example, this one you can just set up the tokens for each phase. That way you always know what you're gonna have to put in. Same thing with this. It's just a reference sheet, and every single rule in case there's any ambiguities. So I would definitely, if you're having any trouble with the rulebook, I would definitely hit the Board Game Geek files section. And since I showed you the cards, so here's the bits. Nice wooden bits. I mean, I like the bits. You can't complain about them. It's not for you. If you don't like Euros, you don't like placing games, it's probably not for you. Worker placement, whatever the hell. Not worker placement, but otherwise, I can't think. I mean, it's really popular for a reason. And if you have to go by my review to get the game, then you're crazy. So, thanks for spending some time with me. Hopefully this is better. Hopefully you guys won't have a complaint this time. I try to get the lighting as good as I could, especially since I'm doing it at night, but I already had a warning on the camera saying that the lighting's low, but I don't care anymore. So this is me doing Power Grid one last time, and look, unless I can't even imagine a reason you would be you would hate Power Grid. It's simple, it's elegant in its simplicity, keeps the game from having runaway. The only thing I haven't done, I haven't played with 6 players, which supposedly because of the limited number of areas, there's only 5 areas on each map. With 6 players, you have 2 players starting in the same area, and they're both at a disadvantage. Also, supposedly, you're at a disadvantage if you're starting in the west, because the price, see now, when you build, you're always going to pay, it's either 5, 10, or 15 to build in that city. When you go from your first city to your second, it doesn't matter where you place your first one, as long as it's in your zone. When you go to the first to the second, you're paying the 5 if it's the first, 10 if it's the second, 15 if it's the third. But you're also paying the connection fees between cities. Now you can also move between multiple cities and pay multiple connection fees, but it's always easy to move within 2 cities and pay that connection fee. Now what happens on the US map is that the West Coast and the Midwest the West Coast and the Midwest in general, the flyover states, are so spread out that the connection fees are a lot more than compared to like Savannah to Atlanta, which actually costs nothing to build. So it is some weaknesses, but I don't see it being a huge, I don't see it being that much where, oh my god, I can't play this game because there's a weakness if 2 players start in the same city, same area. Of course I haven't played that way, but I recommend the game. Hopefully you understand me. Look, no fan this time, no nothing. And hopefully this video gets almost 2,000 views for no reason I can comprehend at all. Thank you very much. Have a good one.